Because again, back to the 35 Latinos that first year, and that number kept expounding. It was never a static, solid, that group only, those 35. The following year, year 69, I'm sure it was 70, 80 kids, and it kept growing and mushrooming. So there's more and more folks that came along. But in 68, 69, when that first group was there, the university dealt a lot with how do you deal with these kids. One, you got to put them in the dorms because, living off campus was a little tough for a lot of these kids. We were pretty new, so being in Lander made a lot of sense for us. And many of the young ladies were in some of the other dorms. In Patterson was the dorm that my wife was in, and I recall that one. But they were starting to be in there, and eventually they integrated Lander Hall. But the social side of our kids being on campus, us being on campus, is the first thing we wanted to do was form into an organizational group. And for lack of a better name, we called ourselves the United Mexican American Students. That's UMAS. Now we had senior, employed or professors and staff that were working for the college. And I remember Dr. Summers was the leading person, in Romance languages, is I think what division or department he was in. But he was one of the leading sponsors. There was another guy named Tomas Ibarra Frausto who worked for Channel 9, and he was a great guy. Very, very influential with the students as well. There was Tony Schuler, her name was Antonia Castañeda Schuler, and she became my EOP student recruiter boss, but she was the young lady who was staff. There were some other folks that were also older than us, 17, 18-year-old guys, but Erasmo Gamboa was one of those guys who was older. Tino Gamboa, his brother, was one of those. Frances Gamboa, their sister, was one of those. And she eventually married a gentleman named Art Gallegos, which is, Sid Gallegos was one of our EOP members. Art Gallegos was one of our EOP persons. And Art became, and Phyllis, then Frances became husband and wife. But they were on campus. They were the slightly older generation than us guys. But as young kids, with all that energy we had in those days, we formed first in UMAS, and the university was, in those days, trying to work with us, and there was an older building that was on the bottom side, back side of Lander, pretty close to Mike's Burger Bar, I guess, or on the other side of the block. Anyway, it was a little building, and they said that we could use that. So we had this small house. It was probably 1,000 square feet in this building. So we put a couple of desks in, some file cabinets. We had a phone in and stuff like that. Wow, we had a place. It was UMAS. That was us. So we would hold meetings of UMAS, at our, I don't want to call it clubhouse, at our organizational building, and we'd all be there. So it was all of us, like our 35 guys would, and men and women were there. And our I don't want to call them administrators, but our advisors and so forth would help give us ideas. So we did a lot of things on campus and helped try to improve our life, dealing with financial aid and classes and instructors and tutors. And, I was horrible in math. And one of the young ladies, her boyfriend was, I think he was a math major, or maybe he already had his degree or whatever. So he was my tutor in math. And so that's how we survived some of that stuff. So that was pretty good. And so UMAS did a lot of things to help us get through. The academics was part of it. Housing was part of it. Financial aid was huge. And we all knew more family and more people out there within the state that wanted to be recruited to come to school. So UMAS played a role in helping to bring some of those kids to campus, or at least getting to some of those parents and so forth. During those times that first year, I became a student recruiter because the next year, guys like Tom Hilliard, they had done their share of running around knocking on doors, and they wanted to send us young kids out there. So Aaron Maltos, Jesus Lemos, Gilbert Garcia, my brother Floyd Sandoval, and myself all became student recruiters. And so I literally got those jobs because as work-study students, in part because we were connected with UMAS and that kind of stuff. So that was a good way for us to move forward. One of those times, probably in, I'm going to guess 1969, probably the end of our 68, 69 year, we caught wind of this national piece, this new change of a name and a group called Mecha, and we all said, what the heck is that? Well, Movimiento Estil Chicanos de Aztlán. And we go, yeah, okay, so what the heck is that? We had no idea, and we were all, I guess you would call us the country bumpkins of Washington, not knowing this, what was coming out of California and Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and those kind of stuff. We didn't know what Mecha was. So the more we learned of it, we were saying, gosh, it's like UMAS, it's just a different name. And it's probably a better name than UMAS, So we went, yeah. And so we all kind of said, well, we should be that. So we changed our name. Maybe it was an official vote and learning Robert's Rules of Order and all that wonderful stuff. But I think Lemos was our president of UMAS at the time. And so we changed our name to Mecha. And so I think he continued on as the chair or the president of Mecha. So I think he was our first president. So it kind of started that way. And we continued to do on-campus things as we could through that. And that was good for our social life, good from our kind of involvement in school life on campus and in the dorms and stuff, and furthered our connections through tutoring programs and the academics and financial aid and housing and all that. There was tons of things to do.